I never believed in the paranormal until I took the night security job at the Harwood Psychiatric Hospital, a decaying Victorian structure that had been abandoned for 15 years before a development company bought it with plans to convert it into luxury condominiums. My job was simple: walk the premises every 2 hours, check for vandals or squatters, and make sure the building remained secure until demolition crews arrived in 3 months. The pay was exceptional, almost suspiciously so, but I was desperate after losing my previous job and facing eviction. The first week passed uneventfully, just endless corridors smelling of mold and peeling paint, rooms filled with rusted bed frames and overturned wheelchairs, the typical debris of institutional abandonment. I'd set up my station in what used to be the administrative office on the first floor, spending my shifts reading or watching videos on my phone, venturing out only for my mandatory rounds. It was during my second week that I first heard the singing. At approximately 2 in the morning, while conducting my rounds on the 3rd floor, I heard a woman's voice, thin and wavering, singing what sounded like a lullaby. The melody drifted from somewhere deeper in the ward, beyond the recreation room. I called out, assuming it was a homeless person who'd found their way inside, but the singing stopped abruptly. I searched every room on that floor, finding nothing but empty spaces and shadows cast by my flashlight. I convinced myself it had been the wind moving through broken windows, though I felt uneasy for the rest of that shift. The singing returned 3 nights later, same time, same location, but when I reached the 3rd floor, I found all the doors to the patient rooms closed. I distinctly remembered leaving them open during my previous round. One by one, I opened each door, my heart pounding harder with each creak of the hinges. In the 7th room, I found fresh scratches on the wall, 4 parallel lines dragged through decades of grime, revealing the plaster beneath. The marks were at eye level and looked recent, the exposed surface not yet dulled by dust. I photographed them and reported the incident to my supervisor, who barely seemed interested, reminding me only to log any evidence of trespassing. The following night, I brought a baseball bat with me on my rounds. The 3rd floor was silent, but when I returned to my office, I found my thermos of coffee knocked over, the liquid spreading across my desk, soaking my logbook. I hadn't heard anything, no footsteps, no doors opening. I checked the security footage from the single camera pointed at the main entrance, but it showed nothing unusual, just the empty lobby, exactly as I'd left it. I began to dread the 2 a.m. round, that specific hour when the building seemed to wake up around me. On my 16th night, I encountered something I still cannot rationally explain. I was walking past the hydrotherapy room when I heard water running. The door was ajar, and pale light flickered from within. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run back to my office and wait until dawn, but I forced myself forward. Inside, one of the old porcelain tubs was filled with water, steam rising from its surface, despite the building having no functioning plumbing or electricity beyond the temporary lights I'd installed. The water was moving, rippling as if someone had just climbed out. I approached slowly, peering into the tub, and saw my own reflection staring back at me. But my reflection was smiling while my actual face was frozen in terror. I stumbled backward, and when I looked again, the tub was dry, coated in rust and cobwebs, as it had been for years. I fled to my office and seriously considered quitting. But I needed the money desperately, and part of me still clung to rational explanations. Stress, lack of sleep, carbon monoxide from the old heating system. I bought a carbon monoxide detector and set it up in my office. It never went off. The encounters escalated. I began finding objects moved during my rounds. Wheelchairs positioned in the middle of hallways, chairs stacked in impossible towers, patient files scattered across floors, even though the filing cabinets were locked. One night, I discovered a message written in the dust of a window. "Help us." The handwriting was childlike, uneven. I researched the hospital's history and learned that in 1968, a fire had killed 17 patients on the 4th floor, which had housed the children's ward. The official report blamed faulty wiring, but contemporary newspaper articles I found at the library hinted at negligence. Locked doors, staff who'd fled without attempting rescues. The 4th floor had been closed off with a chain and padlock, marked as structurally unsound, and I'd been explicitly instructed never to go up there. Of course, I eventually did. On my 23rd night, I found the chain cut, the padlock lying on the floor, the door to the 4th floor stairwell hanging open. I climbed the stairs, each step protesting under my weight, and emerged into a hallway that was noticeably colder than the rest of the building. The children's ward was different from the adult floors. The walls had been painted with faded murals of cartoon characters, and smaller beds lined the rooms. In what must have been a playroom, I found dozens of drawings scattered across the floor, all depicting the same scene: a building on fire, stick figures behind barred windows, and a larger figure standing outside with keys in their hand. The drawings were old, the paper yellowed and brittle, but they'd been recently arranged in a deliberate pattern, forming a circle. In the center of the circle was a rusted key. I picked it up, and immediately the temperature dropped so drastically that my breath came out in thick clouds. The door behind me slammed shut. I heard footsteps running up and down the hallway, children's laughter that turned into screaming, and beneath it all, that same lullaby I'd heard weeks before. The lights from my flashlight began to flicker, and in those moments of darkness, I saw them, small figures standing in doorways, watching me with hollow eyes. A little girl in a hospital gown appeared directly in front of me, her face covered in burns, and she pointed down the hallway toward a door marked "Staff Only." I ran toward it, not knowing what else to do, fumbling with the key I'd picked up. It fit perfectly. Inside was a small office, and sitting at the desk was a figure in a nurse's uniform, her back to me. The nameplate on the desk read S. Morrison, head nurse. She turned slowly, and I saw that she had no face, just smooth skin where her features should have been. She stood and moved toward me, and I heard her voice, though she had no mouth. "You shouldn't have come here. Now you're part of it. Now you remember." Suddenly, I was experiencing memories that weren't mine. Being in this hospital as a night orderly in 1968, smoking a cigarette in the basement while alarms rang above, ignoring them because I'd heard so many false alarms before. Then smelling smoke and running up to find the 4th floor engulfed in flames. Children screaming behind locked doors, searching frantically for the master key, while knowing it was too late, making a choice to save myself instead of trying to break down the doors, emerging into the night air and watching the building burn, telling investigators afterward that the doors had already been open when I arrived. living the next 40 years with the guilt, dying alone in 2008, and somehow remaining here, trapped in the scene of my greatest failure, reliving it endlessly until someone else came to share the burden. When the vision ended, I was standing outside the hospital in the parking lot, dawn breaking over the horizon. I had no memory of how I got there. In my hand was the rusted key, and on my arm was a burn scar that hadn't been there before, shaped like small handprints. I went home, packed my belongings, and left town that same day. I sent an email resignation to my supervisor without explanation. 2 months later, I saw a news article reporting that the Harwood Psychiatric Hospital had burned down under mysterious circumstances the night before demolition was scheduled to begin. Investigators found evidence that someone had been living on the 4th floor despite it being sealed off. They also found my baseball bat and thermos in the wreckage, though I distinctly remember taking them with me when I left. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that lullaby, and I wonder if I'm actually free or if I'm still standing in that 4th floor hallway, experiencing just another layer of the building's endless nightmare, waiting for the next person to come and share what I've become part of. The key passing from hand to hand, the guilt transferring like a contagion, the children still waiting behind their locked doors for someone to finally let them out. The silence at Blackwater Bend is not the quiet you know. It is an absence so profound it feels like a physical pressure on the ear. I moved here to the old ranger's cottage 3 months ago, seeking precisely that, silence, after the cacophony of a life that had crumbled. The city's noise was a constant reminder of failure, of divorce papers, of empty bank accounts. The forest, I thought, would be neutral. I was wrong. The first week was the only sounds were the rustle of pine needles and the distant cry of a hawk. Then the birds left. I didn't notice at first until I realized my morning coffee was no longer accompanied by their chorus, just that heavy, woolen quiet. I blamed the season, a shift in weather. But the weather didn't shift. The air remained perfectly still, as if the world were holding its breath. Then came the footsteps. They began on the porch, a slow, measured tread creak pause. Creak that would circle the house each night just after midnight. The first time, I grabbed my hunting rifle and flung the door open. The porch was empty, the motion sensor light bathing the warped boards in a sterile white glow. Nothing, not a footprint in the dew. The following night, they returned. This time, they didn't stay on the porch. I heard the front door's handle rattle, gently, as if testing its strength. Then the footsteps retreated. The next night, they came up the stairs. My bedroom is on the 2nd floor. I lay rigid, listening to the slow, deliberate ascent, one step every 10 seconds, a patient, predatory climb. They stopped outside my door. I saw the old brass knob turn a millimeter to the left, a millimeter to the right. The lock held. I did not sleep. The rational mind clings to fraying threads. An animal, I told myself. A trick of the settling house. But the house didn't settle anymore. The silence had seeped into its bones, freezing it in place. The footsteps were the only violation. I set up cameras, a cheap wireless system from town. That night, the footsteps came as usual. I watched the live feed on my tablet, sweat chilling my skin. The porch camera showed nothing. Yet the audio feed picked up the creak perfectly, synchronized with the vibration I felt through the floorboards. The hallway camera showed the empty landing, the dusty runner, my closed door. And as I watched, the doorknob began to turn. There was no hand, no shadow, just the slow, deliberate rotation of tarnished brass. Asterisk, I stopped leaving my room at night. A bucket in the corner became my toilet. I brought up cans of beans and a can opener. The footsteps began to vary. Sometimes they'd pace the hallway for hours. Other times they'd descend to the basement, and I'd hear a faint, rhythmic thumping, like something heavy being dragged. The silence between these sounds was worse. It was a listening silence. It felt like the house itself was waiting for me to break. Asterisk, last Tuesday, the phone line went dead. My cell phone had never gotten service out here. The internet, a sluggish satellite connection, flickered and died. I was cut off. That was the night it spoke. It didn't have a voice, not really. The words formed inside my head, dry and rasping like dead leaves skittering across stone. Asterisk, you came for the quiet, it said. The sentence echoed in my skull as the footsteps paced below. I have saved it all for you. It is in the walls. It is under the floor. Would you like to see? Asterisk, I clamped my hands over my ears, screaming to drown it out. My own voice sounded pitifully small, swallowed instantly by the hungry stillness. Asterisk, 2 days ago, I found the first crack, a hairline fissure in the plaster of the bedroom wall, right near the head of my bed. It was perfectly straight, vertical. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, except that when I pressed my ear to it, I heard breathing, shallow, slow, patient. I blocked the crack with tape. The next morning, the tape was gone, and the crack had lengthened, branching horizontally like a dead tree. More cracks appeared. In the ceiling, in the floorboards. They never widened, just spread, a growing map of emptiness. And from each one, if you listened with your soul pressed against it, you could hear a different shade of silence. From one, the hollow quiet of a deep well. From another, the muffled stillness of a sealed tomb. Asterisk, yesterday, I finally broke. I had to get out. I waited for the pale light of afternoon, when the footsteps were usually absent. I grabbed my car keys and ran for the door. It opened normally. I sprinted to my Jeep, fumbling with the key. The engine turned over once, twice, then died. Not a click, not a grind, just nothing. As if the mechanism had simply forgotten its purpose. I looked up at the house. In every window, in the dark glass, I saw the faint, gray reflection of a face. It was my face, but stretched, despairing, mouth open in a soundless scream. And standing behind each reflection, just a darker shadow in the gloom, was a tall, lean shape. Asterisk, I ran then. I abandoned the Jeep and fled down the gravel driveway towards the main road, 5 miles away. The forest was mute. No wind, no insects, no scurry of squirrels. Just the frantic crunch of my own footsteps and the hammering of my heart. I ran until my lungs burned. I skidded to a halt. Ahead of me, nestled between 2 gnarled pines, was the ranger's cottage. I was back. The driveway had looped me around. I turned and ran in the opposite direction, pushing through thick underbrush, branches clawing at my face. An hour later, exhausted, bleeding, I stumbled into the small clearing. The cottage stood before me. The front door was open, a black rectangle, Asterisk, it was hurting me. It was always hurting me back to the quiet. Asterisk, now I am in the basement. The door at the top of the stairs is locked. I heard the bolt slide home after I descended, though there was no one there. The only light comes from a single dusty bulb. The cracks are here, too, dozens of them, covering the stone foundation like a web. And from them the silence doesn't just leak, it pours. It is a cold, dense liquid that fills the air, making it hard to breathe. The thing is down here with me. I don't see it, but I feel its attention like a weight. The dragging thump has started again from the far corner behind the old furnace. It's slower tonight, purposeful. Asterisk, the voice in my head is clearer now. You will be the final vessel, it whispers. The last one was the Ranger. He lasted almost a year. You are weaker. Your noise is almost gone. When it is, the quiet will be complete. It will live in the hollow of your bones. It will speak with your voice. Asterisk, I am writing this on the back of an old moldy blueprint I found, with a nub of charcoal. I will wedge it into a crack. Maybe someone will find it, though I know they won't. The footsteps have reached the top of the basement stairs. They are beginning to descend, one by one. The light bulb is flickering. With each step, it dims. The silence is no longer an absence. It is a presence. It has a shape. It is at the foot of the stairs now. I can see the cracks in the wall behind it widening, not to let something in, but to let the silence out. The bulb gives a final, feeble pop. The dark is absolute. And in the perfect, seamless quiet, I finally understand. It doesn't want to kill me. It wants to make me empty. It wants me to become the silence at Blackwater Bend. The last sound I will ever hear is the soft, dry rustle of its approach, and then nothing, forever. It was the silence that made me check the cameras for the first time. Not a dramatic, dead dove night silence, but the thick, muffled quiet of a Tuesday afternoon in my own home that felt suddenly, profoundly occupied. I'd been reading, and the familiar creak of the old maple in the yard, the distant drone of a lawnmower, the soft hum of the refrigerator, they all just stopped, as if the world had been sealed under a glass dome. My eyes drifted to the monitor on my desk, cycling through the 4 security feeds I'd installed after the break-in last year. Driveway empty. Back garden still. Living room, a book left splayed on the armchair. Kitchen, my own back, bent over a cup of tea at the counter. I watched my pixelated self for a full minute, frozen in that mundane pose, before the chill began its slow crawl up my spine. The time stamp in the corner of the feed was wrong. It read 3:47 p.m. The clock on my desk, the one on my computer, the watch on my wrist, they all glowed with the same impossible time, 9:13 a.m. Asterisk, I told myself it was a glitch. A power surge corrupting the camera's internal clock. I went to the kitchen to reboot the system, my footsteps absurdly loud in the stifling air. The kitchen was as I'd left it, but the tea in my cup was stone cold. A wrinkled skin formed on its surface. I'd just poured it. The reboot command executed with a soft beep. The monitor flickered and the feeds returned. All for now showed the same image, my empty hallway from the same high-gale perspective. The time stamp was fixed, 9:14 a.m., But I was not in the kitchen feed. I was standing right here. I leaned in, my breath fogging the screen. In the hallway feed, the door to the basement, always kept locked, was slightly ajar. A darkness thicker than shadow pooled in the gap. Asterisk rationality is a dam that holds back a vast black ocean. I felt the first cracks then. I grabbed the heavy flashlight from the drawer, my hand closing around cold, familiar rubber. The hallway was 10 steps from the kitchen. I took them slowly, the floorboards groaning their old, specific complaints. The basement door was open, not wide, just a 2-inch invitation. The lock, a solid deadbolt, lay on the floorboards at my feet, the screws neatly extracted. The surrounding would It hadn't been forced. It had been disassembled. Asterisk from the darkness beyond the door came a smell, not damp or mold or earth. It was the sterile, metallic scent of ozone mixed with something else, something old and dry, like static electricity cracking across papyrus. I pushed the door open, the beam of my flashlight cutting a trembling swath down the steep wooden stairs. The concrete floor below was visible, littered with storage boxes. Nothing moved, but the air was colder, a solid, fridge-like chill that flowed upwards and wrapped around my ankles. I descended, each step a negotiation with terror. The light bounced off a water heater, an old furnace, my own distorted shadow looming against the far wall. I swept the beam boxes, tools on a pegboard, my own frantic breath pluming in the cold. Asterisk then the light caught it. In the far corner, behind a stack of old chairs, the wall was wrong. The concrete foundation was gone, replaced by rough-hewn earth, the mouth of a tunnel just wide enough for a man to crawl into. The edges were smooth, not dug with tools, but worn, as if by the constant, patient passage of something. The ozone smell was strongest here, a sharp tang at the back of my throat. And on the damp earth, at the tunnel's entrance, there was a single, clean footprint. It was my own size, my own brand of running shoe. But the print was deep, impossibly so, as if I had been standing there for days, weeks, sinking slowly into the ground. Asterisk, a sound came from the tunnel, not a scrape, not a growl. It was the exact, precise sound of my own voice, whispering my own name, but backward, a wet, guttural unraveling of the syllables. The flashlight died. Not a flicker, not a dimming. It was simply, instantly, not light. In the absolute black, I heard the soft, moist shift of earth from the tunnel. Something was coming out. I stumbled backwards, my shoulder hitting the concrete wall, my hands scrabbling for the stairs. I climbed on my hands and knees, not breathing, expecting a cold grip on my ankle at any second. I burst into the hallway, slammed the door shut, and braced my weight against it, my heart a frantic bird in a cage of bone. There was no lock to engage. I heard nothing from below. The house was silent again, but it was a different silence. Now a held-breath silence, a listening silence. Asterisk, I spent the next 6 hours barricaded in my study, a kitchen knife on the desk, my eyes fixed on the camera monitor. The feeds showed nothing. The basement door remained closed. The clocks ticked normally. As dusk fell, painting the room in shades of blue, I began to feel the sharp edges of shame. A power surge, a sleep deprivation hallucination, a prank gone wrong. Anything was better than the reality my gut believed. I needed proof it wasn't real. I needed to see the basement was just a basement. Asterisk, I went back. The door was still unlatched. I turned on the overhead bulb, its weak yellow light. I descended, my new flashlight blazing. The tunnel was there. The footprint was there. But now there were more. A trail of them, my own perfect prints, led from the tunnel mouth. They didn't come back. I followed them with the light, my blood turning to ice. They stopped at the bottom step, as if whatever wore my shoes had simply ascended. Asterisk. I ran then. I called the police from a neighbor's house. I spoke of an intruder, a possible tunnel. They came to officers, patient and skeptical. We went into my house, which now felt like a meticulously constructed stage set. They checked the basement. The overhead bulb was bright. The corner was just a corner, solid, unbroken concrete foundation. No tunnel, no footprints, only a dusty, undisturbed floor. They found the deadbolt on the hallway floor. Agreed it was odd. Suggested I call a locksmith. Their radios crackled. Their eyes glazed with the polite boredom reserved for the jumpy and lonely. They left. Asterisk. I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, watching the cameras. At 3:47 a.m., the timestamp on the feed froze. The image in the hallway feed dissolved into static. When it cleared, the basement door was open again, and I was standing in the hallway. I watched myself on the monitor, my own face, pale and drawn in the night vision glow, my eyes wide with a terror I was currently feeling. On screen, I turned my head slowly and looked directly into the camera lens. A smile I have never worn, a contortion of pure, gleeful malice, spread across my own features. Then the figure on the screen raised a hand, its movement jerky and wrong, and pointed at me. At the real me, watching from the study. It pointed, and then it beckoned. Asterisk. The feed went black. From the hallway downstairs, I heard the soft, unmistakable sound of my own footsteps walking toward the stairs. They were coming up. They were slow and patient, and they knew exactly where I was. The doorknob to my study began to turn. It's turning now. The thing is, I've just looked at the camera monitor one last time. All 4 feeds are live and clear. They show my empty hallway, my still kitchen, my dark garden, and this room. The feed shows me, sitting here at my desk, writing this. But in the feed, I am not alone. I am standing right behind myself, my face pressed close to my own ear, whispering. And the me in the chair is smiling. The door is opening. I have to go. I think it's my turn to use the tunnel.